There we go.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast, where our international panel reflects on the energy realities of the week. So, with us this week to talk about the Trump effect, we have the spinner of absurdities, Mr. David Blackmon. Then we have the very witty Irina Slav, and we have the irrepressible Stu Turley, and then myself, Tammy Nemeth. So, how are you all doing today?
Oh,
Great.
it's just wonderful. Just wonderful.
So much winning, so much to talk
Yes,
about
so
this
much
week.
winning.
Well, this has been such a tectonic week of events. It's hard to believe it's only been a week since he's sworn in. I mean, it's unreal what's going on, not just in America, but in the energy space. And we've got Trump making all kinds of executive orders that are impacting American energy. It'll have knock-on effects everywhere else in the world, which we haven't quite seen yet. At the same time as all these executive orders are being signed with the really big pens, like pulling America out of the Paris Agreement again, that was a big one. We've had European leaders at the World Economic Forum saying they're not changing a thing. They're going to double down on the energy transition. Nothing like making your citizens poorer and deindustrializing your economies for growth. So, David, what's your take on all of these changes that we've seen this week?
Well, so we've had 4 years of a sock puppet presidency, which the Oval Office was occupied by an elderly gentleman with advanced dementia who didn't know what he was doing or where he was most days. And the effect of that has been a complete lack of leadership from the United States on the international stage. And so, even with Trump coming in more aggressively than he did in his first term when he was hamstrung by the hoax, the Russia hoax, mounted by the CIA and the FBI. It's the contrast that's now even more startling than the reality because we've had this 4-year vacuum of leadership from the presidency of the United States. And I think that combined with the utter collapse of the legacy news media in the United States, which no longer has any credibility with the public and very little audience anymore, has resulted in probably what's going to be the most powerful presidency in American history. And the danger for Trump and Republicans is you end up maybe overreaching and overcorrecting for the 4 years of the Biden insanity. And where the energy space is concerned, he in just two executive orders, really, the first day in office, he reversed essentially everything Biden had done related to energy in two different executive orders. And that includes the big offshore set aside that Biden did on January 6, 625 million acres that will be litigated, of course. But, assuming the government takes the case to the Supreme Court, Trump will win on that question. And he's going to win in pretty much all of these lawsuits that the left-wing environmental groups are going to file. And I just conclude by saying that the people at the WEF last week found out the hard way that the world has changed completely, 180 degrees, where their world is concerned related to the U.S. Energy and climate policy plans. There's not going to be any more U.S. cooperation with their energy transition agenda. Now, a lot of what Biden did is set in stone pretty much through the subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act. But even those, Trump is going to have a lot of authority to redirect much of that money now. And about $500 billion was unallocated at the end of the Biden administration. So it's a lot of money to redirect. And, it's a real shock to the system, I know, for Klaus Schwab and Bert de Brinde and all those folks at the World Economic Forum, who have gone along thinking the United States was going to lead the way in this energy transition and meeting these Paris goals that really accomplished nothing related to the climate except for the reallocation of trillions of dollars from lower classes to the wealthy class. And yeah, I mean, the shaking out of all of this over the next few months is going to be a real sight to behold, and is going to give all of us a lot of fodder to write and talk about.
For sure. Um, Related to that, Irina, I mean, I watched a bunch of the World Economic Forum sessions, and I got a real sense that there was even last year they were talking about the bifurcation in the global order. So you have like America and Europe and countries on one side, the old West or whatever, and then you had the BRICS countries on the other side. But I sensed that there was a bifurcation within WEF this year of the different companies. So you had the businesses who were looking at what Trump is proposing and thinking, wow, we're going to make a lot of money if we go to the United States. And then there was other companies, especially the financial services companies, who were still committed to whatever the European project was for the energy transition. What was your take about what was happening in the United States and how the Europeans were reacting to it?
Well, as you already mentioned, the Europeans for now are, doubling down. And their latest, they're preparing to present this Green Industrial Deal or Clean Industrial Act or something, I forget the name, next month.
Yeah.
And the latest idea is mandating low carbon products, for example, in public procurement tenders, which is a genius idea, especially in the context of the Trump presidency. With Trump, Europe is even worse. It stands even worse in terms of competitiveness. And what do? They completely, they go all in on the industrializing Europe, on sapping consumer demand and making life unaffordable for absolutely everyone, with very few exceptions. And that's their idea of improving competitiveness by mandating that we buy low carbon products. I think they're in the denial stage. They have been in the denial stage for years now, but now it's got a lot worse because of Trump. After all, let's be fair, they can't just turn around and say, oh, we didn't really mean that whole net zero thing, because they will be laughed out of the building. They can't do this. So they will keep pretending, but the businesses, the energy utilities, the power utilities are already sensing which way the wind is blowing, as they wrote in my Substacks today. And they're actually happy about Trump, because Trump is going to be good for the power utilities.
Yeah.
I don't know the other companies with all this additional regulation coming, but I think we should give them a few months and see if they're beyond hope and salvation. I still have my doubts on this. I think they might see the light of reason yet. And here's Denmark. I mean, it's hysterical what's happening with Denmark. It's not objectively hysterical. It's actually quite sad, because I really like Denmark. I really like their culture. I admire it, their architecture and all that. But really, they thought they could have the US protect their back militarily against whether phantom or real threats. And they would never ask for anything in return. Well, here is Trump asking for Greenland. He's not asking, he's demanding Greenland. And they are in a state of shock because they didn't expect it. I think it's pretty much the same in the energy space, with perhaps a little less surprise, because they knew Trump was not going to embrace wind and solar and EVs.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's happened to the stocks of wind and solar companies over the past week. They've just been doing a nosedive, especially which one is it? The Norwegian one that was going to do the offshore, the East Coast?
Or
Yeah.
they're Danish.
Sorry,
The
Danish.
yes.
Yeah.
It's not about the
Another hit on Denmark. Poor Denmark.
Poor Tim.
But I think with respect to Greenland, there's all the rare earths and whatnot that are there, a lot of mining potential. And my understanding there was that there was a significant concern about China's inroads there, and the potential for them setting up a base and doing a port and doing the infrastructure thing with the Belt and Road, just like they did in Africa, which received a lot of resistance from Denmark and the Europeans and whatnot. But that I think that threat was there, and that is factored into maybe part of Trump's thinking about Greenland.
There's a lot of
the thing is that Greenland is basically autonomous, or so they say, and so says Denmark.
So they say.
And really, the only people who should be deciding what happens to Greenland are the people living in Greenland, even
Exactly.
if there's just 57,000 of them, which is what their premier said.
Yeah. I mean, if they do a referendum and they want to go, if they do a referendum and want to go, then that should be their.
No, that they already said they don't want to be part of the United States.
Right.
But they are not opposed to greater cooperation with the United States,
right?
Which is a very civilized, stance, I believe.
Exactly.
But we'll see how it goes.
Well, Stu, with all of these things that have happened this past week, what do you see for the Trump effect in the American energy space?
That is a wide open question, and I think that we're about to see some huge things. First, on Greenland, there is a lot of military action going on with China and Russia up there, and Trump has already gotten approval to expand our military base up there. So he's already got what he really wanted, and that is a bigger military presence up there. But as far as the wartime Powers Act, President Trump is making coal great again. And one of the things that this is bringing up is a gigantic issue around the world, is that we're now realizing that all of a sudden, good morning, Patrick.
Good morning.
That baseline energy or baseline power for the grid has been overlooked, abused, and was pretty much treated like a stepchild. Yes. And now President Trump is enacting the Wartime Powers Act to lengthen coal plants and not shut them down as much. And we're seeing that reverberate around the rest of the world. If countries don't have low cost power, I think you've heard me say this before, regimes change. And it is going to be a wake-up call for everybody to realize that baseline power. Now, President Trump also said the other day that I thought was very good. The technology in China does not stop coal plant fumes from coming over to California within 4 days. It's not so the 2 coal plants a week that they're putting up. Why should the United States shut down our coal plants? And the United States let me refresh everybody's memory. We've dropped our CO2 output by 20% over the last 4 years by putting in natural gas plants. And so a side benefit is we are going to see a resurgence around the world for natural gas power plants. In fact, Bill Gates at Davos said, well, we're going to need a lot of natural gas power plants in order to get AI. Bill Gates said that. And then you had Larry Fink say, oh, I think we're going to need a lot of natural gas power plants. So the Trump effect is bleeding over to Bill Gates and
Jamie Dimon too. Yeah.
And Jamie Dimon. And it is absolutely going to be anyone that is building natural gas power plants, that's who you want to invest in. Now, the Wartime Powers Act also allows President Trump to build pipelines. Here's where it gets real weird in the United States, and that is New York. You can't build a pipeline in New York. And Kathy Hochul, who has the brain power of a potato bud. A potato bud has more brain power than Kathy Hochul. Governor Hochul is ruining the economy in New York, and she's going to even stop this, even putting in pipelines to save money and lower energy costs in New York won't happen. How's that?
Right. I mean, that it's interesting that there's all this potential resistance to using the Emergencies Act.
I have Kathy Hochul. I have a video of Kathy Hochul's response. Hang on. Let me see if I can pull it up. This is Kathy Hochul responding to this.
Why?
Because you can't.
Oh, whatever, man.
I said no.
Whatever, man. Whatever.
I'm serious.
Why?
No.
Oh, whatever, man. Whatever.
No.
Oh.
That's Kathy Hochul responding. Sorry.
Okay. I'm glad that you mentioned Larry Fink and Bill Gates from the World Economic Forum events, because, you know, they were talking about, as you say, using natural gas for having stable, reliable energy, and that's affordable for all the AI data centers they want to build all over the place. And it's true that in some of the other panels, they were talking about the next generation of chips and systems won't require as much energy, but it still requires energy that's stable and affordable. And, you know, wind and solar and batteries just don't cut it. So they talked about natural gas, and then they talked about what Trump said at his speech, which was hilarious, to the World Economic Forum, was, okay, you can have natural gas as your power for the AI data centers, but you should have a coal backup, because coal is reliable. And even if something were to happen, like a bomb being dropped on it or whatever, you'd still have coal, he said. I thought that was really funny. And I wish I could have seen what the reaction in the room was, because, you know, they had the screen, and then at the very end, when they showed the audience lukewarmly clapping, a bunch of people weren't clapping. They were just sitting there very sour. It makes you wonder just what Europe thinks is going to happen. Do they believe that New York and all these other groups, like the ones that Bloomberg is backing, and then there's a group of governors who have said they are going to still implement the Paris Agreement, and that included the governor of North Carolina, which I thought was interesting, given that Trump was there talking about why is it taking so long to recover these people.
He's a Democrat, though, the governor of North Carolina.
I know, and the new guy got elected. But my understanding is that as part of the climate thing in North Carolina is that anybody who was living along the rivers, they're going to buy them out and leave it just run to nature, like rewilding the rivers. Anyway, that's a bit of a side issue, but
David, where are they going to put the people?
They're just going to buy them out and say, go find somewhere else to live.
At what sense?
That is a gigantic.
I know.
That is a gigantic land grab that is going on.
That's how it sounds.
There is a lot of things on here that will get your YouTube channel shut down if we keep on going down this.
Okay, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but
I'm just letting you know. I have talked to a lot of folks about this, and there's a lot of lithium in our hills. So it is a land grab.
And other minerals.
Also,
working power. EVs are no longer on the agenda.
Well, it's also another issue. And it's the same thing with the fires in LA. What did LA agree to become? Another smart city.
Yeah, on January 6th or 5th, they passed some new legislation that it's no longer for single-family homes. So all those single-family houses there, you'll have to build back with like a fourplex or mini apartments.
And Governor Newsom was dancing like this because he'd already been talking to folks about the new smart city by the UN and the global elites. Same group that Lahaina did, the same group in South America. Every smart city gets a natural disaster. Coincidence or cause?
Well,
I
there
think
did
it's a
was two
coincidence.
people setting fire in LA, you know.
There was a geofence of 86 arsons.
Wow.
Yeah,
80.
it's all
It's not.
they're
It's
all
not
arson.
climate change, and they had UN credit cards and debit cards, most of them.
Okay, so David, to talk about the resistance to what Trump is doing, what do you think? Do you think they're going to try the same stuff they did before, or do you think they have some new
Yeah.
tricks?
Well, it's not really new tricks. There's going to be a greater emphasis on lawfare because what you have to realize about the resistance is it's all through the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party doesn't hold any lever of powers in Washington right now, none. And the media that has been their propaganda arm for the last half century and has had such a pernicious influence on public policy as a result, billions and billions of dollars worth of free airtime for the Democratic Party through the mainstream media has collapsed. I mean, they don't have an audience. And CNN and MSNBC almost have no audience now. It measures in the few hundreds of thousands of viewers now. The TV, the three network television nightly newscasts that from the 60s through the 80s, each of them would average 15 to 20 million viewers every night, do not average that much combined now. Their audience has collapsed. The circulation for the Washington Post, New York Times, their subscriber base has collapsed. And what this has the impact of is freeing up President Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance, who just made a fool of Margaret Brennan on CBS morning show yesterday. It frees them up to act very aggressively without having to worry about having a bad day in the media. Because the media now is what we're doing. The media with the audience now is in podcasts and on social media and other forms of digital media. Substack, yes, and Substack, and we're all on Substack for a very good reason, because that's where the audience has moved. And that audience, by the way, is largely conservative, or at least not partisanly Democrat. And so this is all playing a role in freeing up Trump to act this aggressively without fear of it. I mean, his approval rating is going up on a daily basis, not down, because of everything he's doing. He's almost as popular as Ronald Reagan was at the beginning of Reagan's second term in office after he won a 49-state landslide. So this is a real confluence of high-impact events. And we talked about it on this podcast in October, how important Trump's interview with Joe Rogan was in the campaign to deciding that presidential election. Because Joe Rogan has 25 million viewers for his low-rated podcast. So this is all a big confluence of events, including the collapse of the mainstream media, that is enabling Trump to act very aggressively. It's cowing the Democrats, and their only tool left now in their what used to be a big quiver of arrows they could shoot is lawfare. And so every one of these Trump orders is going to be challenged in the courts. There's going to be, liberal law firms leading all these lawsuit efforts. And so what you're going to see happen with all those is the Justice Department moving very aggressively to force these cases up to the Supreme Court, where Trump has a 6-3 majority, and that majority could grow over the next 4 years. So it's a really difficult situation for the Democrats, and the danger for Trump, in my view, is overreaching and overplaying his hand and engendering a backlash from conservative Republicans, the ultra-conservative, my principles Republicans, in opposition to some of the things he's doing. And, that could happen because he's just kind of freed from all these shackles that he faced in the first term. And it's could be overly liberating to him, I'm afraid.
So, Irina, what do you think? I mean, The European reaction to Trump has been kind of mixed between sort of saying they're going to stand firm, but then on the other hand, kind of sucking up. So, like, I mean, Starmer was saying all kinds of stupid
They're
stuff.
so incompetent. They're so bad. I mean, Kaya Kallas, the chief of European diplomacy, is talking about petitioning Russia.
What?
Yes, she's talking that Russia may still lose the war in the Ukraine, and that would be good because then they could break Russia into pieces. This is the chief of European Union diplomacy people, and they're talking about sending European military people to Greenland while saying that they will buy more LNG from the United States. But I was wondering while I was listening to all of you, how would they square this commitment, because they will commit to buying more LNG from the US, with their green targets? You can't have more LNG, you can't have more gas and push people to pay more for electricity because it's supposed to be green, which it isn't because it's still generated from gas. Our leaders in Europe are in such a big mess of their own making. I have no idea how they will survive that.
That's a really
and
good
I hope
point.
they don't, by the way.
Because it struck me,
Really?
and we had a little discussion in the email about this idea of energy segregation. So the common people will get stuck with the wind and solar to meet whatever climate targets they've decided on, but then the industries they deem as absolutely necessary, such as the AI data centers, in order to control everything that people are doing or whatever, to monitor, to make sure, like the one guy from Greg Jackson from Octopus Energy was talking about, oh, if we could just get AI properly on the grid, it could take care of all of the different management and make it more efficient, and tweak this, tweak that, and everything will be great and it'll all be running. But we need to have the dedicated energy for those for the AI data centers,
Really?
right? So you'll have the reliable, affordable natural gas for the essential AI data centers that will then tell the rest of us that we have to not use our computers so much, or don't use the washing machine, wash by hand, all this kind of stuff.
That's
So
paradoxical, isn't it?
it is.
You're
It
trying
is.
to get people to use more energy as long as it comes from you as a provider, but then because of this hypothetical, for now, segregation, you have to tell them to not use as much energy at certain times during the day. These people are stupid. No, seriously.
Exactly, because they have these national targets of the emissions, right? And so if they then put all the natural gas for the AI data centers, that's going to produce emissions. So what the rest of us have to scale back in order to ensure that the nation is still meeting its national determined contributions. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
it's not going to happen because too many people will be affected by such a development, and they won't stand for it because there are too many of us. If it was just affecting one group, say the poorest, but the group of the poor, not just the poorest, but the group of the poor is growing. That's a lot of people whom these other people would need to convince that it's all for their own good. This will be really tough.
Yeah. It's all for
Don't
our own
worry,
good.
for
And the
your own
AI
good.
will tell you,
Yeah, it's very
because,
important.
that's neutral. It's not a committee, it's an algorithm.
Yeah.
I
And
think
don't worry, it's for your own good was the line that Big Brother used in the 1984 novel, right? Assuring the people it's all for their own good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they're
think-
already
Stu?
seen through this. I don't know. It's like the pandemic. They tried, how many other pandemics they tried to start as in scare pandemics? It's not working because people don't care about it anymore.
Right.
Stu, what do you think?
Sorry, Stu.
I think we're going to see microgrids come into play in a very huge way, and those that can afford them will be better off. those that cannot afford them will be relegated to leftover high cost power. And if you can afford your own microgrid, you're going to have low cost energy. So it's going to further the divide between the poor and the rich.
Yeah.
No
That
question
could very
about it.
well happen in Europe for sure.
Yeah.
Well, folks, should we go to the news
Oh, yeah.
headlines?
Let's.
I love that one.
Okay, so
Oh my!
sneak behind enemy lines. Okay, so
They're gonna
this is an
sneak
article.
up on them. It's not gonna work in the cold. So
I
they're
know.
gonna what, push it down the hill.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so the first headline, which just cracked me up yesterday, I think it was in the Daily Telegraph in the UK. So the UK Special Forces have commissioned an electric Jeep that instead of they have the historic Land Rover that they use for their missions or whatever. It's really robust and reliable and everything else. But they've commissioned an electric Special Forces Jeep, and I quote, this is from the headline, that will sneak behind enemy lines undetected because it's quiet. It's a hybrid, so it's got 4 massive batteries, and supposedly will be able to run 4,000 kilometers without need of a refill. I call BS on that.
Yeah.
So it's like, can you imagine a special forces with their gear? They have this really heavy vehicle because it's got 4 batteries on it.
Yeah. Think how much that's going to weigh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what kind of testing they've done. Is this something that they've been required to do, probably as part of the energy transition? But yeah, I mean, that was just hilarious. Just hilarious to see. Like, what? It's like the electric tanks that the former NATO head was talking about, that's what they were researching, was electric tanks. I'm just like,
I think
sorry.
Patrick Devine's first comment on this nails it. We're only going to plan wars during the warm months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And make sure it doesn't overheat. Don't want it too hot.
Yeah.
You know, spring and
Spring
autumn.
or autumn. Yeah.
But not summer. Exactly. How much does that Jeep weigh? 4 massive batteries, in addition to whatever other equipment they would put on that Jeep. So
Going downhill, the inertia is gonna be-
Detected. I mean, armies don't just detect vehicles by sound. You know, they don't listen to the
It's such a stupid. The whole thing is so stupid.
sneak
Brain.
behind enemy lines undetected. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, you can't make it up. And then another story I have is from Canada's leadership race for the Liberal Party, which is currently the governing party. They're governing with the NDP, but the Liberal Party, Trudeau resigned, and they're trying to find a new leader. And Mark Carney, of course, has thrown his hat in the ring. And so a bunch of MPs have thrown their support behind him, including Canada's eco-radical Steven Guilbeault. And Steven Guilbeault has been the architect of the carbon tax and all of these different kinds of policies that Canada has brought in. And now even Steven Guilbeault is saying, well, you know, the carbon tax has become quite unpopular. So I think we're just going to have to find a replacement, meaning we need to have it in such a way as people don't see that it's a carbon tax, but everyone will still be paying. You just won't see it. And so he's thrown his support behind Mark Carney because he said he knows that Carney will continue with the climate direction that the current Liberal Party has done. And I thought, well, of course he will, because he's been advising the Liberal Party on their economic policy since COVID, since 2020. So yeah, I mean, all the stuff that's been happening in Canada, you could argue, you could throw that at the feet of Mark Carney, because technically he's been their advisor. Their economic advisor. So our economy has, you know, in 2015, we were at parity almost with the United States. Now the United States productivity is about 40% higher than it is in Canada. I mean, it's terrible. But anyway, I thought that was hilarious that Steven Guilbeault is supporting Mark Carney. And for people, that should be The fact that Guilbeault is supporting Carney should tell you everything.
Yes. It's all
It'll be
you
the
need to
same
know.
old, same old.
Hopefully it will tell them everything.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, and then I had one last one. And this is, so in the UK, Ed Miliband is the minister responsible for environment and climate change. And the Labour Party received £5 million in donations from Dale Vince, who is also one of the original funders of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, I think maybe. And he owns a company called Ecotricity, which is where they do vehicle charging and they do solar array projects and stuff like that. And so in Lincolnshire, which has some of the most fertile land in all of England, they are just going to paper them with solar projects. The councils have come out against it. And there were 2 projects that were put forward. The council said no. And Ed Miliband came in and said, no, we're going forward. And they're for Dale Vince's company. So it pays to be giving donations to the Labour Party if you're a business or whatever, because they will make rulings in your favor. And
Is
it's
that
just
blatant
deplorable.
conflict of interest?
I know.
Oh, oh.
I know.
It's corruption is the word.
Absolutely. It's like that peer that was giving all kinds of cash for Keir Starmer and some of the other cabinet members to buy clothes, to get makeovers, to do all this different kinds of stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, you got me. Yeah, well, I kind of needed it. And that was it. And so I don't know what the rules are in the UK with respect to conflict of interest, but clearly this is a big conflict of interest.
Pretty clearly, yes.
So anyway, that's my 3
Really?
little rants for today.
Goodness gracious.
And your Nemeth report Substack.
Yes, please check out the Nemeth report on substack.com. I'm posting little bits about what happened at the World Economic Forum this past week. It related to energy and whatnot. So please check it out.
You're a brave woman, Tammy.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, doing this to yourself, watching the World Economic Forum.
I know it's pure torture, but I'm doing it for all of you.
It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So, Venture Global, this is me. Venture Global IPO signals a return to normal order for LNG exports. Venture Global is a big LNG export company. It has 5 different terminals under construction in various different stages in Louisiana right now. It had an IPO and raised $1.75 billion in capital at a share price of $25 per share on Thursday and began trading on the New York Stock Exchange Friday. And it just is, I just wrote that story because it's just such an indicator of where we're going now in the Trump administration. It came 3 days after the IPO, came 3 days after Trump reversed Biden's idiotic pause on LNG permitting that lasted for a year, which was stupid to begin with and worthless, and produced a report that everybody glanced at for about 5 minutes and threw in the trash can, and that was the whole thing. Just,
May I say this?
rude.
May I say this on this, David?
Sure.
May I say this?
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson admitted on TV last week that when he was talking to President Biden was not aware that he signed that ban.
Yeah, he didn't even know he'd signed the order. I mean, it's just such a. The whole 4 years was just a 48-month-long series of hoaxes. That's what it was. It was a hoax presidency. The permitting pause was just one of hundreds of hoaxes that they ran, scams. And the same kind of crony capitalism dominated their energy policy that Tammy was describing happening in the UK and Canada. And, that's all over in the United States. And those subsidies and incentives from the IRA are still in effect. But trust me, the next 4 years, a lot of that's going to go away too. So that's the first story, and good luck to Venture Global. Hopefully, they'll get all those terminals open and they can start expanding the industry again. The second one is Trump moves to reverse Biden on energy with a special focus on wind. Again, on the first day in office, Trump signed an executive order pausing all permitting and construction on the various half a dozen or so big offshore wind projects in federal waters on the Northeast Atlantic coast, pending a review by the regulatory agencies to assess impacts on marine mammals, birds, and the marine fisheries industries. I've written half a dozen stories advocating for that over the last year. And the order looked a lot like a suggestion that I made in early December in a story suggesting an order pausing the wind industry. So I'm glad they did it. I'm not taking credit for it because I'm not that arrogant, but I'm sure glad that they did this. The wind industry, the offshore wind industry, needs to die. It really does need to die. It's worthless. It doesn't provide energy that is scalable in any real way, and it increases. I mean, it's just created rapid inflation of ratepayer for home electricity all across the Atlantic, the northern Atlantic states in the United States, and it needs to stop. And so I'm glad this is the first step that, in a series of steps, the Trump presidency is going to take to end that fiasco for good. And I wish them the best of luck. So that's it for me.
Great.
And your Substack?
So yes, I'm on Substack, Energy Transition Absurdities. I post most days. Didn't yesterday because I was involved in granddaughter's volleyball tournaments over in Dallas, and but I don't take many days off. And there's a lot of good content, not just from me, but some other folks who allow me to repost their stuff.
There we go.
Okay, Irina.
Oh, a great story from Britain, which boosted electricity exports to France because of high winds. It was producing so much electricity from its wind turbines that it had to start exporting to France, which is a wonderful thing. And France had to, dial down its nuclear generation because there was so much power coming in from Britain. Several days later, wind is generating less than 1% of UK electricity. Less than a week. I just read this today in the Telegraph.
Yeah.
And this is why, as David said, wind must die, and it is already dying. But it's really, and not only was Britain boosting electricity exports, but it was still producing more than there was demand for. So several wind installation operators were asked to turn off their turbines, for which they were going to get paid by the government.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Like going from more than, I don't know how many percent of total generation to less than one in just a few days. It's a roller coaster. It's exciting. And the other story is Renewable giants shrug off Trump's anti-wind policies. Electrification is absolutely unstoppable. Now, first of all, we have two senior executives, one from Siemens Energy and the other one from Iberdrola. And they're talking as if, Edison invented the light bulb the other week. The electrification age is just beginning, said one of them. Are they serious? They continue to believe that the world is going to be electrified, completely electrified, and we're going to stop using oil and gas. The other thing, however, they are eager to cash in on their non-wind and non-solar power generation business, which is why I'm sure they're both, and they're not alone, huge fans of Trump. Because Trump wants more energy.
Yeah.
He wants more oil and gas energy. And they have the technology, the expertise to provide it. One of them, the Siemens energy guy, was boasting about people paying for reservations of gas turbines. We haven't seen this in a very long time, he says. For them, the Trump presidency is a boon, especially for Siemens Gamesa, because Siemens Gamesa turned in yet another quarterly loss because of its wind power business. And some of it, most of it really, was offset by its other business, which has nothing to do with wind. It has to do with grid technology and gas generation.
Yeah.
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 Of course, they will shrug off Trump's anti-wind policies in a year. They will have forgotten they were trying to be very wind-oriented companies.
I find the language there really interesting because it's like a mockingbird effect. Electrification is unstoppable. Ed Miliband said the same thing. Scottish Power said the same thing. Then you have these other renewable companies saying the same thing. It's like they have this little grab bag of vocabulary, and then one person says it, and then they all echo the same terminology for reinforcement or something.
As if nothing is electrified right now, and we coal.
Yeah, and we should never forget that denial is always the first stage in the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah,
and so they're in the first stage right now.
What's the second stage?
Well, I know. I'll have to look it up.
Anger. When's anger?
The problem is, I don't think they will voluntarily move on to the final stage, which is acceptance.
No.
Yeah.
They will have to be dragged there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do not miss Irina Slav on her Substack. It is a treat.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I love her sense of humor and sarcasm. It's so refreshing.
It's so deserved.
So deserved.
Sorry. They deserve it. They don't deserve anything else but mockery, really, at this point.
And Irina, your Substack?
Irina Slav on Energy, my Substack.
Yes, subscribe to Irina for your weekly dose of entertainment.
Yeah, I'm trying to start doing it daily now with shorter stories.
Oh, good luck. That should be great.
Thanks.
Okay, Stu, we've got some fabulous stories here.
I'll tell you what, we've already covered make coal great again. I really got tickled at Trump on that, and you said, but instead of mega, it's Meka, I guess. I'm not sure. But the article, the article from the Romanian minister came in on my feed, inspired by President Donald Trump, and I really do not want to butcher his name, and I apologize. Berduja, I think, in Romania.
I don't know how it's written. Let me see.
Yeah,
he's a minister of what?
Revealed a shift in Romania's energy strategy, moving the Green New Deal to the Smart Deal. He criticized the EU's environmental policies, arguing while they may be well-intentioned, they risk making European economies victims of bureaucratization and decisions divorced from economic realities. I think he must watch our show. I think that's why I got out of that. Anyway, he is really exemplifying what leaders are now understanding. Chancellor Scholz is now understanding he is facing a runoff from someone that actually wants the Nord Stream pipeline rebuilt. Go figure this out. I did not have that on my bingo card, but regimes change when low-cost energy is not around. And this is from Patrick, Future Podcast. Trump made a comment over the weekend criticizing African leaders for failed leadership. With all the natural resources through the continent, African countries should be massively prosperous. I agree with that, Patrick, 300%. And NJ Inuk is the head of the African Energy Chamber, and he is in a 300% agreement with that statement, Patrick. And we can try to get him on. He's a little tough to get on. But Africa first needs to be something that is spread around the world. Every country first. Take care of your country first, and then worry about trade with other countries, because China is going to roll over you. The U.S. is going to roll over you. You've got to do what Millie's doing in South America. So sorry about that.
That's all right. I mean, I think of Jasper and how there's this whole movement to deprive Africa from using hydrocarbons, where there's all this money pouring in to push solar and wind on these poor communities, which really don't do much to help the people out of poverty, get fresh running water, to have the mechanization for menial tasks that, he has these little videos of his family out there separating wheat by hand. It's insane. And how much it costs to get a little milling machine, but the milling machine requires energy, and they don't have enough electricity to run the little milling machine. So I think you're right, Stu, that the poor African countries have been sort of exploited and manipulated by, I would say, these global institutions led by the European Union, pushing the wind and solar battery agenda rather than doing what's best for those people, which is to have reliable
habit of exploiting Africa since colonial times.
Since forever.
The Belgians.
Yeah.
And the world economic.
That's what they do with Africa. They're not interested in African countries having strong local leadership. This is why there are so few African countries with actual strong leadership that prioritizes the well-being of the nation.
Yeah.
And I think what's particularly cynical about this push of wind and solar on African countries is, I strongly suspect it comes from the assumption, it's a really horribly cynical assumption, they are not used to living in comfort anyway.
Yes, I've heard that argument. That's so insulting.
Okay, I'm not as twisted as I thought, but this is my suspicion, that this is what they think. It'll be easier to push wind and solar on them because they don't know about electricity 24 hours a day anyway.
Yeah, they've never had it anyway, so why not just let them continue living that way?
And of course, they're paying activists. Juspa told me they are paying people to be activists and to protest for example, the East African pipeline.
It sounds like America.
Well, I've read different studies, Irina, that talk about that, where in the developing nations, it would be a travesty for the world if they had access to as much energy on demand that we have. And so the solution is to raise them up a little bit, to have a barely subsistence level, whatever, and we have to come down a lot in order to balance out.
Well, that's how we become equal. That is smart. So why would it be a travesty? Because nature would suffer?
Yes, it would be a travesty for the planet.
Yes.
It would kill the planet, apparently.
That's what the globalists view as equity. That's what that word means.
It's like
what the globalists or the elitists do not understand is that, as NJ Inuk, the director of the African Energy Chamber, a fantastic man, has said, quit giving us subsidies, quit overcharging us for money for wind and solar. Let us get low-cost energy here, exploit our natural gas resources, and make the products here in Africa and sell them. If you took this model and really helped Africans build products and then started trading with them when they built great high-paying jobs in Africa, using African energy, you would have a better trading partner. Oh, wait a minute. You'd make more money if you actually did this way. And then all of a sudden,
make longer still.
but people would be healthier. And
I agree.
and
But
so
they don't care about people being happier. They do not have a long-term vision.
Yeah. Well,
so,
and then there's the issue of corruption, which would have to be
Oh,
addressed.
yes, absolutely. But we haven't solved corruption in Eastern Europe.
Exactly. I'm thinking UK, what just happened? Is that not corruption?
Oh, yeah.
And they're
yeah.
worried about the corruption in Africa? Like, how are we
can't
any
solve
different?
that problem. You can kind of mitigate it a bit.
one of the things that I've discovered is my wife doesn't trust anything that I say, even after 38 years of marriage. And I think it's because that's the way she is. It's like if you're a cat trying to raise chickens, right? I got a video, and when you first look at this cat shaking the chicken, thinking that eggs are going to come out of this thing, it's the same thing. When you do the same thing day in and day out, it's not going to change. That's the definition of insanity. And we've got to change how we address our political leaders around the world. Vote their raggedy carcasses out. Did I just say all that? I'm sorry about that. Let's watch this this cat trying to do some chickening. Let me
Oops,
bring
we
it
missed
back.
the shaking. There we go.
I get it better at the end of it. Now, the AI, these cats are incredible. I got to find me a cat like this.
Man.
I want a cat like that.
Look at that.
I want to eat the birds.
Now, the Trump effect, we've only got 2 minutes, but with President Trump now unleashed and podcasts and X being the media, I'm censored all over the place, and I can tell why. I should be, because I speak too much. But here's President Trump being President Trump.
Rate in the U.S. and we have a very high unemployment rate in France. How come? What's the recipe for?
Well, maybe we have a better president than you do.
New research says that there are, for immigrants on the whole,
Come on, try getting it out. Try getting it out.
I'll get it out.
I mean, I don't know if you're going to put this on television, but you don't even know what you're talking about. Try getting it out. Go ahead.
The question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Talking to me.
We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which
Did
was,
you hear
what
me?
did you want
Did you
him
hear
to
me?
Yes,
Ask
sir.
him a question.
I will, but
I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude. Okay, question? Yeah, go ahead. Sure. She's shocked that I picked her.
No.
She's like in a state of shock.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you want to rein in Robert Mueller?
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus?
Because it comes from China.
Racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from
Which the
China.
CIA admitted over the weekend.
President, overall, South Korea has done 5 times more tests than the U.S. per capita. Why is that?
I don't think that's true. Who are you with?
Yahoo News, and it's not true per capita.
Do you want to respond to that?
Anyway, he responds back and he goes, "Oh, that's why." And it turns out they tried to fact check him right there, and he fact checked Yahoo News, and he goes, "That's why you're Yahoo News. Nobody watches you."
Well, I watched one of his when he was signing the executive orders, and he was taking questions while he's doing it. And the one journalist, I couldn't get over the disrespect. When it was Biden or Obama or whoever, it was always very respectful and, oh, yes, Mr. President, blah, blah, blah. And this guy was cutting Trump off, and he was just being incredibly condescending. And it's like, the hatred so strong that they can't even, check the attitude at the door and treat the office with
Yeah,
respect.
and they're going to have to stop doing
They're
that.
not professionals, that's why.
Right. They're going to have to change
So
that
true.
behavior. If they don't change that behavior, their platforms are just going to completely collapse. And I don't think they're capable of changing the behavior.
I agree.
No, they don't seem to see anything wrong with it. But
Right. Yep.
I would
exactly.
like to see someone treat Ursula von der Leyen like that and see what happens.
me too.
Yeah.
I could, if given half a chance.
Do it, Irina. You could go to a scrum and question her. That would be great.
I don't want to go to jail.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with us discussing the Trump effect, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks
All
for
right.
the comments.
Have a great week,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a wonderful
Bye.
week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.